Hi.
Sorry, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, Fresh Cuppers, to the Fresh Cup podcast. We have some special guests today. We have Pastor David, as always. I mean, you're still special.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. That's sweet. That's very good. That's very good.
And,
that.
I mean, the real star of the show here.
Yes, the real star.
Courtney Mayberry.
Good job.
I did it.
Mayberry,
I did call you Courtney Crossan.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Courtney Mayberry is here with us today.
Courtney.
How are you,
Courtney,
Courtney?
my shortney, is actually because my daughter placed in my telephone her name as Courtney, my shortney. So when I call her, it says Courtney, my shortney. Or I have to tell Siri, call Courtney, my shortney. It's really weird.
I love that so much.
That's amazing.
Which is also just so funny because Courtney is not short.
That's the best part.
No.
That's the best part.
That's
Courtney,
the best
my tall knee, but doesn't quite have the same.
It doesn't have the same
Try
thing.
it. We'll see if it sticks.
Well, good. Welcome, Courtney, my shortney.
Thank you.
To the Fresh Cup podcast. We are very glad to have you here. It's been a long time coming. We've been trying to make this happen for a very long time. Each of us individually got like some sort of form of the plague.
For sure.
Something.
So just traded it around for a while. Mm-hmm. But we are back and stronger than ever.
Yes.
Yeah?
I think so.
Yeah, you feeling good?
I think so. I can talk now.
Yes,
That's good.
true.
That was the thing that didn't happen
that
for
was
a
definitely
good
a
2
thing.
weeks.
Yes.
That was so a thing.
Okay, so Courtney, to kick us off here, we are excited to learn a little bit more about you. So, if you had to pick, what would be your favorite boy band? And why?
Question.
An important question. We have
Such a good question.
tackling all the good topics here on the Fresh Cup
Super
podcast.
spiritual.
I
We're
know.
all about
It's
it.
very important. I'm going to just bypass NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. I know.
Well,
I'm sorry, Alina.
Here's the thing. Today, I should have brought it in here. I brought my NSYNC lunchbox today, so I brought my lunch.
It's pretty cute. I will say I probably would have picked Backstreet Boys, so maybe that's why I'm skipping it, because we don't need that to be the debate.
Courtney.
But move right past it, and I'll tell you my actual favorite boy band is Jonas Brothers.
That is
Easily.
That is
Easily.
a very good choice.
Easily the best.
David, what is your
I'm
favorite?
just going to let you guys have this whole conversation. I've just decided. No, my favorite.
I know you have a favorite one because you just went and saw them in concert.
I want to say, are they really a boy band though? Like, they're so much better than a boy band, in my opinion. But Boys to Men, I guess Boys is in it, so maybe I have to give it a boy band. But Boys to Men would be my boy band.
There are 4 boys that now are men who sing,
Yes.
and they have some choreography sometimes.
They do. They
so
do.
I would say,
That makes it a boy
I
band.
mean, have you ever seen Motown Philly? There is
Yes.
some moves.
There's
they
some
are a
dancing
boy
there.
band.
They're a
There's
boy
some
band.
dancing there. I'll
that's
give
a
you
good
that.
choice, though, too.
Well, also a fun fact. I don't know if I've said this before on here before, but my very first concert I ever went to was Boys to Men.
Was it really?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Oh,
All
Yep.
right, let's go.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool factor just went up in my eyes.
Well, Courtney, what was your favorite concert or your first concert?
What was my first concert? Honestly, the only first one I remember in my memory, I'm pretty sure was some sort of American Idol concert.
Okay.
No
You guys
way.
remember those days? I don't know
Yeah.
if they still do it, but back in the beginning of
Is American Idol still a thing?
I think so.
It's on right now.
I think so.
I see the highlights on Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's all.
They used to go on tour, like the top 10 or something would go on tour. My mom was obsessed, so we would go to that, and you would just watch all these people from American Idol sing cover songs. Love it. Loved
There you
it.
go.
What a good time.
Yeah.
Not my favorite. Great
Okay.
time. Not my favorite. Favorite for sure is, again, going to be Jonas Brothers. Probably the one we went to together.
Yes, Courtney and I got to be chaperones.
Yeah, we did.
I don't know if you can call it that.
Willing participants.
Willing participants and chaperones
That's
to
good.
take some girls down to LA to go see the Joe Bros. And it was a time. It was so much fun.
I think they're touring again. Did I see that? I think they just started a brand new tour.
Yeah, there's another one. It's
Again,
like,
Instagram tells me all kinds of stuff I shouldn't
I think
know.
it's like the Jonas Brothers Eras tour or something.
Yeah.
Because everyone's doing that now.
Yes.
It's like their version of the Eras tour.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. They are getting up there in age, you know. They are men, not the boys anymore. They're a man band.
Man band.
Man
That
band.
just sounds
The
so
family
wrong.
man band.
I don't know.
like
There's
it.
just something about that. Let's just go back to boy band.
Okay, I have one more question
I'm ready.
to get us started before we jump into the real questions.
I'm ready.
Okay, Courtney.
Yeah.
What is your favorite bird and why is it a crow?
Stop!
What is this? There's
Why did
something going on here.
You have been holding on to that idea, and Just so that's a shocking question. It is not.
You can tell by the look on your face.
Not.
Yes.
Courtney hates crows so much, which I understand. They have ulterior motives for sure.
Yeah, they remember you.
They stalk you.
So you can't even show fear.
I know.
And I'll tell you honestly, the sound of birds flying creeps me out.
Yeah.
And for some reason, crows are just not afraid to do that right next to you. Like, they just wait. They wait it out.
They're very scratchy yes.
I'll have to send you a video of this it's a carnival cruise that I just saw this morning where this guy opens up his room door and no kidding, there are 40-some birds that are all flying around in his room.
Nope.
I'd be like, burn it down. Nope. Give me another room.
I'm done.
We might be in the middle of the ocean, but I am abandoning this ship.
Absolutely not.
It is
Drop
true.
the life raft.
Birds are kind of creepy in general, but crows especially. So
think about it for a little while, and you will now become scared of them too.
Yes. There's a reason there's a horror movie called The Birds.
Yes.
I mean,
that was
creepy.
Crazy. You started that question, and I still didn't know where it was going.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Good.
I just had to go for it.
No, that's good.
We can go into a whole thing about irrational fears too, but it's fine.
Make this deep. Turn that into a spiritual question real quick.
Okay, Courtney, let's get into it.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, like what you do here at New Life, maybe because some people see you a lot, but maybe don't know exactly because you wear a lot of hats, as we all do. And so tell us a little bit about what you do here. Is there anything people might not know about you?
Oh, fun.
Like a little fun fact?
I'll start with my fun fact, which is the thing that people probably don't know. I have 6 siblings.
Oh.
Which we can get into the explanation of that, and we will get into this as it's talking a little longer. But 6 siblings, and we'll explain that, which is a lot, guys. It's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot of birthdays to remember. It's a lot. What I do here at New Life. So I do wear a lot of hats, like a lot of us. Where people probably see me more often is that I'm a worship leader on staff and then worship arts coordinator. Is that technically the title?
Yeah.
I think that's technically it's something like
Sounds
that.
very HR.
Something exactly. Some sort of title that means that I'm on staff for the worship side of things with Nick and Curtis. And then I also am the preschool director. So that's a part that not everyone gets to see, but we have a full-time preschool at New Life.
Yeah.
Monday through Friday.
You are Miss Courtney.
All day long. I am Miss Courtney.
That is your true identity.
Miss
Courtney. And just all the little kids just run up and get so excited to see you.
Pretty great. It's pretty great. It's my favorite.
It's so good. One of the things I love about that is that you have grown into those roles over time here. And I think that's something that, just is so incredible how God takes us and begins to shape us and mold us in community. And as he begins to unearth the gifts that we have. And so you didn't come to New Life in those roles, but those have been the roles that all of a sudden have opened up, which is just amazing.
Yeah, fun fact, I came to New Life as 2-day-a-week substitute teacher.
Yeah.
Wow,
possibilities are endless.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah,
and look at you now.
Substitute teacher.
Look at you now.
Here we are.
Okay, so since you are a worship leader, and what is there a song that right now that's like just like on repeat for you that is like your go-to worship jam?
Yeah, I go through some serious phases and I do overplay things a lot. To tag on to David's, I accidentally stole David's from last time, I think.
Hey, that's all right.
Made for More.
Yes, so good.
Has been on repeat. I went to my church back home when I went to visit family, and they played it, and that has been on repeat for me. It's so good. The other one is Who Else by Abby Gamboa.
Oh, I don't know that one.
I don't think I know that one either.
Good. It's really
Gotta
good.
have to look that up. Listeners,
Who else is
fresh
worthy?
cuppers out there.
It's
look
a
it up.
good one.
Say it again.
Who Else by Abby
Who
Gamboa.
Else? All right.
Who Else?
Who else?
So
All right.
good.
I'm gonna have to check those out.
So good.
So Courtney, how long have you been following Jesus? How did you meet Jesus? Where did your faith journey begin? How did that whole thing come about?
What a fun adventure.
Your life's on display now.
Yeah, this is fun. This is
good.
good. I think a good amount of people have probably heard this part of my story, but one of my favorite things is that my faith journey really started in preschool. So that's one of my favorite parts of that full circle moment. I did not grow up in a Christian home. My parents semi-attend church now, but depending on which parent. But yeah, didn't grow up in a Christian home, but my mom put me into a Christian preschool because like a lot of our families do. It's like, this seems like a good idea, right? Like, it's a great school.
Well, there's not that many options out there too sometimes.
There's not. And, she's like, I know at the end of the day, they're going to teach my child how to be a good person, was kind of her, I think, her mentality in it. And so I went to a Christian preschool. And so I tell everyone I kind of learned about God the same time I learned about colors, right? Like, you go to preschool and you're like, I'm learning my colors, I'm learning my letters, and I'm also learning that God loves me and this is who Jesus is and all of that. So that was the foundation for me. And that has played a huge part in my life, because for me, I know everyone has their different gifts, but faith is a huge one for me. And I think that plays a huge part in it. In my life that's just always been a fact. Who God is and that Jesus loves me has always been a fact.
Wow, what a blessing.
It is. It is. And I've learned that more as I've gotten older, that's not everyone's gift.
Not everybody. Yeah.
So that was a huge part of it. And then throughout my life, again, like I said, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but my uncle went to church. So we would go to Sunday school with him, or later on, I had friends who would invite me to Awanas, and that was a huge, huge part of my story, was being in Awanas in 5th and 6th grade, and got to be a leader in Awanas in 7th grade. And
did you have all the badges?
I didn't have that many because I started too late, but I tried.
Right. Yeah,
I really tried.
I
tried to catch up as much as you could in end of 5th grade, 6th grade, but didn't quite get all of them. But just had amazing people who made that possible, right? Like, from my next door neighbor who would drive me to Awanas, to friends who brought me in, was incredible.
Yeah. How awesome to just think about God's hand just guiding and directing in such a unique way, but to be able to look back on that and see his hand just guiding and directing people into your life and placing you in environments and positions where you could just hear his voice.
Yeah.
And know him.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And yeah, so I would say I really accepted Jesus when I was in 6th grade at Awanas, and I could still tell you the moment where I was standing. My leader, Miss Gloria, who just came in and loved me so well, as again, not someone who had been in it forever. And sometimes you enter environments like that and you're like, oh, all these kids have been doing this.
Yeah, I'm the
since
outsider.
Preschool. Yeah. But just welcomed me in so well. And then from there, my best friend in high school, Katie, we'll shout her out real quick.
Katie.
Her mom, we love her. Her mom, Karina, was just that first example to me of someone super close who knew the Lord and had a relationship with Jesus. Yeah. Because again, a lot of it for me was kind of programs, right?
Something you attended.
I was invited to programs. I came and I attended and I left, and I didn't have that, model at home necessarily of a relationship with Jesus. And so the more I got to be around them, the more I got to see what that looked like tangibly. When someone would come up to you and say, hey, I see that you're struggling. I'm going to pray for you. And then not just walking away and saying, I'm going to pray for you, but just standing there in that moment and just praying for me and checking in on me consistently was such a huge shift for me in my life. And so when I went to Cal Poly, I ended up rooming. It's a whole crazy story, but rooming with some people from my hometown who all went to the Christian school together in town where I grew up.
Did you know them beforehand?
No.
So
not
they just
really.
randomly.
Really?
That's so funny.
It wasn't random. Okay. It wasn't entirely random. It was that we had met at open house, and so we requested each other. But I knew their siblings, or I knew people connected to them. And so when we came to college, I was like, I don't really know. I'm going to be honest. I don't really know about this Jesus thing still. College feels like a reinvent yourself time in life. And I'm like, kind of a who am I question. And we went to the welcome thing, and they're like, hey, if you want to sign up for Bible studies with Cru, Campus Crusade, come sign up over here and we'll give you the swag bag, and you're in college. You really
draw
want
you in with that swag bag.
You want it.
That's
and so I was
true.
like, sure. And all my friends who are doing it are like, do you want to be in a Bible study? They're like, no. And I took mine. I remember taking it and just checking that little yes. And that was such a turning point in my life that I don't even think actually I know I didn't realize in the moment. Yeah. Until about 2 weeks later, when 2 Bible study leaders knocked on our apartment door and said, you guys are the only apartment where all 4 of you said you wanted to be in a Bible study. Can we host it here? Cool. And that was just another, David, to your point of God's hand on my life and faithfulness of just here, I'm going to place these people, and I'm still here. I'm still here, and I'm still guiding whether I was listening or not all the time. And so I feel like that, I mean, from then on, it's just changed the trajectory of my life for sure.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. I think here in the Nazarene faith, we would call that prevenient grace.
Yes. One of those churchy words we talked about. Yes.
Yeah, we would.
So, Courtney, I know every family looks different, and, every family has positives and hardships. And I know both you and I have come from, divorce has been a part of our story. And I know that can sometimes affect, how we see relationships, how we see God, how we see, God the Father. And that's how would you say that your childhood, I guess we're going to get deep here. How would you say that your childhood has affected your faith, or maybe in how you see relationships or any of that? And how have you kind of found healing from that?
Yeah, that's a good question, a deep question, a big question. So to give some background to the whole sibling thing, my parents split up before I was born. So they were married. My dad went through some stuff, my mom went through some stuff, and they parted ways before I was even born. So that has been my whole life. I never experienced divorce, really. I just...
Yeah, I guess that
is my life. Unique, It is different in that sense. And so both my parents got remarried. My dad has 4 kids. My mom has one who's a younger sister, and I have an older stepbrother on that side. So that's where all 6 come from. But I am the only one with my 2 parents. And so that, kind of led to a lot of, I think, identity questions. Yeah. A lot of my life was just kind of, who am I? And I lived full-time with my mom and my stepdad and my sister, and saw my dad different phases of life, different amounts of time. But it's just when you bounce a little bit like that, you kind of learn. I think for me, I learned how to mold into whichever environment I was in very well, which I now look at that as such a gift. I feel like God gave me a lot of gifts and a lot of ways to cope with things and figure things out in a way that really protected me and protected my heart, especially when I was really young and you're not able to process that at a young age and really identify any of that. But yeah, I would say that was the biggest thing. But I think too, one thing my mom did so well was she made all of the roles of people in my life very clear. No one was left out. Nothing was muddy. So although my mom met my stepdad when I was I think 1, I don't know, I'm guessing on that, but I was little. She met him at the daycare that I was at. But anyways, she met him really young. They got married when I was 3. So he's always been there, always been a part of my life, always been that father figure in my life. I still did not call him dad. And that was something that I think I'm thankful for in the sense that it wasn't confusing, but I will say that that when it comes to viewing God as the Father, that was a little confusing for me in the beginning. And I think that's a story of a lot of women, especially if you have anything with your dad, if you've lost your dad, anything like that, that can be tough to understand. Not that my parents weren't all great and doing everything they could to make a weird situation as best as possible for me. I know that, especially as an adult now, everyone did the best that they could with what they had and what they thought was best for me. That name and label alone was confusing because the person who was full-time in my house did not have that name for me necessarily, if that makes sense.
Right.
Versus where I always called my dad, and but it just looked different, I guess. And so as I got older, that name was just a little confusing, and I had to kind of pull it apart a little bit, I think, and realize what God's heart and meaning behind that is, and him as a father. And then now I can look back and see the different people who played different pieces of that role in my life.
I think what you're articulating so well is that so often we have our origin story being in our circumstances that we were born into, And at some point, we have to reorient ourselves and our origin story into the story of God. Like, we're part of his story,
Right.
not just the circumstances that we were born into. And that's tough because those circumstances that we were born into, there's history, there's wounds, there's things that are happening there that so shape us. And yet God says, hey, let me invite you into my story and redefine who you are and your identity and how you see life and how you see Father even by me and my standards rather than what you've experienced. And it's challenging.
We had a good conversation at youth this week. We broke up into girls and boys were in separate rooms and stuff, and we talked about that kind of identity and talked about, you know, seeing God as your father and how that is so hard for people who have a father that, you know, maybe is not there or has passed away, or, you know, it's just complicated. And I have a lot of girls in my group that have complicated stories like that too, but it was a really good discussion about like how we can, you know, heal the view of God when the earthly fathers, because every earthly father is going to fall short of obviously of that example of God the Father. And so like talking about how, you know, we can heal that view. And I know you have been a big, supporter of therapy, Jesus in therapy. And I guess how has God used that means to just help you become who God created you to be and maybe heal some of those wounds?
To say I'm a big supporter is probably an understatement. You know, I think it started for me, the biggest thing is knowing when going to therapy, just identifying and saying out loud, this is hard. Right? Yeah. Like these pieces of my story are hard. And that's what God wants us to do, right? To say, to not hide it, to not give him like, oh no, I'm fine. And I think for a lot of my life, it was like, I'm fine. I'm just fine. I'm good now. I'm fine. And so the first was just, I think, being able to come and say, I'm not fine. I'm not okay. These things have been hard. They've been difficult. They've shaped me in ways that I probably don't even realize. And I want to like kind of change that trajectory. So that was the biggest thing. But a lot of it going back to, like I said, with the identity piece, I had so many questions for so long about like, who am I? And I think that's where like that song probably hits for me, that Made for More that I was talking about. It literally starts with, I know who I am because I know who you are.
Yeah.
Like, because I know who God is, I know who I am. And so the biggest thing for me in therapy, you know, was one of the first few like sessions I had. She said, now listen, I know that, Courtney, you want me to give you some homework, right? Because if you guys know me well, you know I'm kind of like a doer, right? Like I want to do things. And that's where I feel like,
give me the expectations. Tell me what is expected of me so I can meet those expectations.
Yes.
Exactly. That's Enneagram 2. Tell me what to do and I will get it done. And she said, I'm not going to do that for you for a while. And I was not happy about that. It's not my favorite. But one of the first things she told me, she said, Courtney, the only thing I am going to tell you to do is, she said, I want you to go home and I want you to read Psalm 139. She goes, have you read it before? I said, yeah. And she goes, okay, but I want you to really read it. And I want you to do like kind of what we tell even like our students to do, like put your name into it. Realize this isn't a passage that's about someone else you think deserves it, but it's also, this is for you and personalized. And that, again, like that just changed. I think that changed everything for me, and just realizing like, I don't need to fit into all these places because God knows who I am. Right? Like, even though
you don't have to be the chameleon anymore.
No, I don't have to shapeshift everywhere. I have this identity, and it's not, you know, something on a piece of paper that I wanted to, because I think I wanted to go to therapy and have them be like, here's this and this and this. This is who you are, Courtney. I'll tell you. I'll give you all the answers. But just knowing that I am his, and I know who I am because I know who he is. Is probably my greatest takeaway.
What a journey.
Wild though. Like, you know, it's crazy when I come out of it and like just praying into like sharing my testimony today and thinking about it. I can put it into that short of a thing, but that's like a 5-year. That was a 5-year journey.
It wasn't just like you read. It wasn't just like you read Psalm 139 one time. And you're like, good, got it.
It's a 5-year journey. It's a constant a constant journey with the Lord.
I don't think we sometimes realize though how radical that is compared to how the world tells us to figure some of those things out. Because you're sitting before God saying, God, you tell me who I am based on who you are and who you created me to be, versus the internal that kind of takes God out of it and says, my heart's going to tell me who I am. I'm going to just go internally and I'm going to begin to define that versus allowing God to shape us in that way. And I think sometimes people go internally and they end up thinking that, they're going to find the answers that they want and they're left wanting, and then rather than if we go to the one who did create us, the Psalm 139, the one who has the blueprints for how we were created and who we are, the one who created all things and knows our innermost being. And we say, God, will you reveal to me who I am? Based on who you are, based on who you created me to be.
Well, and even, what you learn in Psalm 139 and just in that process of God not only created you, but he created you on purpose. No, despite the circumstances of, what was happening to create you scientifically, but God created you on purpose and for a purpose and knew, had this vision in mind for who you would be and he created you to be. So it does, when you think about it like that, make so much sense. Obviously I should go to God to figure out who I am, because there can be such thing as too much introspection sometimes when you have to, bring God into it. Just you by yourself thinking about yourself is probably not always the most healthy situation.
Not great at all.
Well, and even what you said reminded me of what we're actually going to be talking about during Lent a lot, is that, you had been at this place where you're like, I'm fine. Everything's fine, whereas and you were fine, you could be like, I'm fine. But, we're going to start this series called Beneath the Surface. And I think that's a lot of what so many of us just live at that I'm fine level,
right?
Because going deeper is scary, and figuring out what lies beneath the surface is scary, because at some point we don't want to say, we want to be able to say we're fine, but we're at this settling level, but I feel like, we were made for more.
Made for more, you guys, made for more. Yeah. I think one of the things too that I learned in therapy pretty quickly, because as an I'm fine person, your emotions tend to stay like this all the time, is that you can only feel as high as you let yourself feel low. And that's a scientific side of psychology, but also
I don't like that.
It's
as an Enneagram 7, I reject that.
I know you don't like the lows, but for me, it was so necessary in realizing God wants so much more. There's so much joy for me when I also bring him the pain. Wow. Rather than trying to stuff it in, trying to keep it all in. When you bring him the pain, it doesn't mean especially for our 7s that you feel all that pain by yourself, but you have to, again, coming back to you just have to say it sometimes. You have to say, Lord, this is hard. Yeah. This has been rough. Whatever that is. Yeah. And on the other side of that, there's so much more joy when you just let yourself feel all of that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That is good. And speaking of joy, you are a newlywed.
I am.
Yeah. When is your anniversary?
June 1st.
June 1st.
9 whole months, you guys.
9 whole months of marital wisdom. So the rest of
Ask me for advice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you are a newlywed. And, I know our culture sometimes can be obsessed with marriage, and it can be even an idol, and love and Hallmark movies can become, the example of what love is and what, your life is supposed to look like. So from, worldly standards, sometimes you got married a little bit later than others.
You can say older. It's fine.
It's only because our culture is so messed up about that it is it makes you feel that. Because, I got married at 25 and I felt like I was an old spinster, because all my friends got married.
33 is next level.
Yeah, because all my friends got married at 20, and so I was like, oh, what's wrong with me? The identity crisis. So I guess how did you meet God in that waiting period, or how did you experience God in your singleness before getting married?
Yeah, I think, it's a lot of it was just, again, like finding my identity in who he says I am, and just setting up my life in a way that's like, I want to be focused on the Lord, because again, when you don't grow up in that and that's not around you all the time, I think I spent, the probably 10 years before I got married just surrounding myself with other families, other Christian families, believers, and just looking at like, okay, that's what I want to be, hanging out at the Hutzco's all the time. Avila's, like all of these people around me that I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it looks like to be like a family unit who follows Christ. This is what it looks like in the day to day. And so I feel like I just spent that season of like, this is going to be my focus, is just, again, being like the best version of myself. And so I would like to say that was all easy all the time and it was fine. And I never felt like, is this ever going to happen? I definitely felt like that. But obviously then you hit the other side of it and you're like, praise the Lord that, like I didn't force it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And that I feel like I've been surrounded by people who would not let me do that either.
Yeah.
Right. Who
are
like,
settle.
there's more for you. There is more for you. Don't force this. Don't push anything else to happen. Like there is more for you. And I just learned to trust God in a way that was like, at the end of the day, I believe that there is someone for me, but you have to hit that point where you're like, but I'm okay if there's not.
Yeah.
I'm not just fine, but like I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good if there's not. And then, and then there's Noah.
Yeah. Well, I think what you begin to discover is that no longer were you looking for someone to complete you.
Yeah.
You were like, that's the adage that we use in the world, right? Hey, I need someone to complete me. Rather than when you and Noah came together, it was two individuals who were completed by the Lord, and somehow together you were going to be greater than your, not completed, but like you're a partner in the kingdom of God and in that relationship, not someone who completes that relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I forgot this morning. I was like praying through it and kind of talking to Noah about this part of it too. That Matthew verse, Matthew 6:33 popped in my head. It's just like, seek first the kingdom.
Yeah, so good.
And all will be added. So it's like seeking first the kingdom. Noah and I were both doing that on our own. And then that's just an addition, right? Like this partner I have now.
It's like MSG. Marriage is the MSG,
just makes everything
just flavor
better.
enhancer,
Just makes everything better.
Gluten MSG. There we go.
Just makes it all better.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Sorry.
I loved it.
And it can cause stomach problems. So let's just be honest.
It has its moments.
It has its moments.
It has its moments.
That is, yes, maybe that's a terrible, yes. Marriage is much better than MSG, but it does enhance. It does have an enhancement, you know? It's like one of those things
everything
that's like.
but the bagel, Elena.
Yes.
I love everything but the bagel seasoning.
I know you do.
I like that. Yep, put that on everything. It makes it better. Yep.
I know.
Flavor enhancer. Marriage is a flavor enhancer. Okay, so what's like one thing since you've been married a whole 9 months now?
Crazy.
What is one thing that has just surprised you about marriage?
Oh, okay. I think number one, I'll say I just really like it. Like again,
good.
Like that's the joy in like I think waiting for like your person is I just like it. And I think about. I watched before I met Noah, before I was dating anyone, you watch the Moines share an office and you're like, that's what you want in life, right? Like,
no, not everybody wants that in life. We are the rarity for sure.
It's crazy that you guys are just together that much. And like, that is honestly how Noah and I are. It's just like, there's just feels like there's not really enough time. So when we're together, no matter what, it just, everything feels like it's better, whether it's a good day or a bad day. I think the most surprising, and I would say probably like, one of the difficulties of getting married a little later is that I lived by myself for a long time, you guys. So living by yourself and
you have your ways of doing things.
You have your ways of doing things. You clean things when you want to clean them. You don't when you don't. You put things where you want them and you find them where you put them. Those are the funny things of just like joining your life with someone. It's
That is a very real struggle of marriage. in general, because, you know, you settle into, like, once you've been married for a while, you sort of settle into like different roles, you know, or, you know, like, oh, I do this and I do that. And I do 95% of the cooking, but Jared does 95% of the dishes. So I always have to find I need to find the pans, and he puts them away. And sometimes they're not where I would think that they would go. So
we have like a kind of running joke, Noah and I, on that kind of stuff, where I'll be like, hey, do you know where my keys are? And they're never going to be in the spot where you think they are. So then you find it, you're like, they're over here in this cabinet where you always put them, like where I always put them. So every time we find something that's just not where it's supposed to be, or most likely the other one put someone else's something somewhere else, it's like, it's where you always put it. Like, what are you talking about?
For sure.
David, do you have anything to add?
No,
to that?
I was just thinking. I actually was thinking how much our partner in marriage becomes a part of our sanctification. Like, so there's just this element where someone who does things just different than you requires you to go to the Lord and say, all right, Lord, you need to shape me in this area, because it's not really that big of a deal, but it feels like it, you know, or teach me to hold my tongue, Lord, you know, or any number of things where the Spirit of God just uses those. It's not these big things, it's the everyday things that the Lord is just constantly shaping you further into His image, that you might reflect it, but also into an attitude of service of your partner. And so I think that there is something significant about that marriage relationship, that the Lord is sanctifying you and setting you apart for His good works. And it literally comes down to sometimes, yes, I'm going to let her have a chair where she puts her stuff, and it's going to pile up, and I'm just going to be okay with that.
We got that chair.
So, you know, those are the things.
Yeah, and even just thinking about, like, sometimes I get convicted too, because you get into that whatever, and then you're like, wait, I'm complaining because my husband did the dishes.
For real.
You know, like, that seems so ridiculous in the grand scheme of life and marriage, and just, you know, but we can settle in. We all have our little quirks that we can.
Right. It's all good. It's not that deep. To David's point.
No.
It's just sometimes you learn, like, it's just not that deep.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. No. So now that you have been married for all of 9 months, have you seen God's redemption story in your life, as far as, like, you know, we talked about changing the trajectory and, like, you know, different generations or different models that you have had, and, like, you know, seeing different examples? Like, have you seen God's redemption in, like, breaking some of those chains that maybe things that you expected to happen and didn't, or, you know, different ways to see, like, your version of marriage with Noah different than examples in your life?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like we're a whole 9 months in, but it's very different, right? It's very different than what I grew up in. And that's not to say where I grew up was bad. I had an amazing house with parents who loved me very well. But it looks different, right, when you are seeking His kingdom first. And that's a huge shift in my house, right? That is our number one priority. When you wake up in the morning and you have, again, you know, when you're single on your own, whatever, a lot of that, you're like, okay, I need to drive the ship, right, of these, like, spiritual disciplines. But then you have someone come alongside you who is also doing that, and that just changes the atmosphere of your entire house, right? Like, when our mornings start with a devotional, that changes the atmosphere of our house. And that is so different, you know, than what I knew. And so that is just a huge shift. And, you know, just seeing, again, that following Christ, loving Jesus is not programs all the time. Programs are great, right? There's so much value in it. I love me a Sunday service. I love some Wednesday youth group. All of those are amazing, and they bring us in and bring us closer to God, but it is also so much more than that. And so changing the way, again, that, you know, like, as a unit, like, our family views that has been huge, you know, just way more relational and intentional with our time with the Lord is so different. And, like, that's our hope, is that we keep that going.
Long obedience in the same direction, right, David?
Yeah, for
there
sure.
It is. Yep.
No, and the other thing that I think you're hitting on is you have a very public ministry. And this is a message that the Lord has, you know, been speaking into my heart over the last couple of weeks. You have a public ministry in terms of your leading of worship. You have a public ministry in leading a large ministry to a ton of families. You're in the you're Miss Courtney. You are a superstar when you walk through the hallways. But your public space should never be bigger than your secret space. And so you're being able to, again, like you said, change that atmosphere.
Yeah.
You can't walk into those spaces if you haven't spent time in the secret spaces with your Heavenly Father and being shaped by Him and in His Word and allowing yourself to be molded. And I think that's we know this principle. Like, people see people's success and they want the success or the fruit, but they're not willing to go through the process. And I think that's one of the things that you're articulating in terms of changing the atmosphere in your marriage or in your ministry is people can look at that and be like, oh, Courtney and Noah, they love each other. Oh, they're so cute together. Oh, yeah, that's so awesome. They have such a great relationship. They have fun together. Those are all good, but it's in those secret spaces where the Lord really shapes you to love each other that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like Courtney has always very much so modeled that so well that Miss Courtney is Miss Courtney. So there's not putting on a show, like it's obvious and evident that you have a deep well and a deep relationship with the Lord. And it's not just like a show. It's not just like a persona that you put on when you come to church, like you,
turn it on.
Yeah, you are you. And that comes, like what David said, it comes from those moments, whether it's with you and Noah or you by yourself, it comes from that. That's how you become that all fully integrated human that is following and pursuing Jesus. So do you have any spiritual practices that you have that have just really shaped you over the years and helped you dig that deep well?
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to doing anything when you don't want to. I think the deepest well for me is dug when I'm worshiping when I don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? And let's be honest, sometimes we come on a Sunday and sometimes I'm like, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to sing this song right now because I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Right? But you do it anyways, and I think that's what I've always learned to model. And the same thing goes with anything at home. That's I'm going to worship even though it feels heavy. Yeah. Right? And then again, that joy comes so much through that.
It's not a fake it till you make it, because it's not it's not a fake it, but it is there is something powerful when you do something that you don't feel in the moment and then God changes it,
Yeah. And I think maybe even saying I don't feel it or I don't want to is maybe not right. It's just that it's difficult, right? Yeah. It's difficult to, especially when it comes to worship for me, it's difficult to sing this song when I am in the depths of whatever that may be,
Right.
It's difficult to sing it, and it doesn't mean that I don't believe it here. You just, right. For me, sometimes I have to keep singing it until it hits here, hits your heart. And so,
well, and I know that you take it very seriously as a worship leader. We always talk about, you can't lead somebody to a place that you haven't been before. And I know that you take that seriously. So I know that is that I've never thought about it that way, of just every week. Week in and week out, having to do that work in order to make sure that your worship is authentic and that you are, even if you don't feel it, you're doing it out of obedience and God's meeting you there.
Yeah. I think, this past weekend we were singing that song, Do It Again. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't this weekend specifically, but I've led it before years ago, and you're singing that and you're this feels right. You're walking around these walls and you're Lord, why have they not fallen yet?
Yeah, right.
But then you get to that chorus of that song and it's your promise still stands. And I think that has, is so important to remember that regardless of what we see our circumstances looking like, his promise is still standing. Good. He's still faithful.
I wonder, the passage, and we know this passage in the 23rd Psalm, but what's coming to my mind right now is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And there's something about that why do we feel like we have to self-lead ourselves out of those spaces?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like somehow like we think, oh, I've got to, kind of fake it till I make it.
Mm-hmm.
What if that's actually not the model? What if the model is, Lord, would you guide me with your rod and your staff and teach me how to worship in this moment when I don't feel like it?
Mm-hmm.
Would you teach me how to trust you when I don't feel like it? Would you guide me when I don't really want to follow you right now?
Yeah.
And that's authentic.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? That's not
hard.
That's hard, but
is.
but that's part of that's part of the walking it out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah.
So Courtney, what are some of your maybe like hopes for the future? How can our listeners pray for you? Pray for you, pray for Noah? Like
I mean, I joked with Noah that I was going to say this, and now I'll say it anyways, is 100 babies. 100's aggressive, but, like, there's just,
pray
like...
for 100
Yes.
babies.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, like, a dream of ours, to have a family and to have kids in the future. So definitely prayer for that is always welcome. And just, I think for me specifically, to circle back with, like, talking about my family is just that I would be a light, right? Sometimes it's just shining that light in a way that, resonates, I guess, for each person, and just praying that I would just have that wisdom and discernment, I think, too, of when to have conversations, when to just lead by living my life in such a way, that people see Christ through me would be great.
Yeah, it's been cool to see how many people we've had on the podcast that all have similar, like prayers for their family in different ways and different seasons. But yeah, like learning how to be a light in your family is so much harder sometimes than being a light just to like the people at your school or at your work. It is there's
Carries
so
a
much,
different-
it's a different weight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would you say you see God working in your life like right now?
I think he's just right now. I think coming out of like the conference we went to, I haven't listened to all the episodes. I don't even know if you guys have talked about this already, but
We haven't had an episode since
Yeah, no, we haven't.
since we've been.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So went to the conference, the M25 conference in Kansas City, and coming out of that, I think I've just had a different hunger for that, telling more people about the Lord, whether that's telling, showing, praying.
Yeah.
I think I've just had this, like, especially when it comes to prayer, like just this like fire reignited in me,
so good.
or like growing in me to just be praying for people, because I think sometimes we underestimate the power of that, right?
Yeah.
And for me, who is such a like, I want to do things, and if I do it, I want to do it well. Sometimes I get myself stuck, right? And then I carry on the weight for myself that's like, I have to do this, and I have to do this well. So especially when it comes to like sharing my faith, I'm like, you wait for like just the right moment, right? And then I can tell them, or then I can invite them, or then this. And it like, I think I forgot, honestly, just about the importance of just prayer. Right.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's been huge for me recently that I don't always walk in, but it was like a big shift in my own like thinking about it, is like when you're thinking about praying for somebody who doesn't know Jesus, or you want to invite them, like you come with the assumption that God is already working in them, that God's prevenient grace is already working at them, that you're just like this, come in at this moment. It is not up to you. Like you have the assumption that God is drawing them. That God has been calling them, that God has been inviting them in. You just might be the voice that day, or the seed that gets planted that day. But like, you just go in with that assumption rather than like, it's a cold call, like it's not just like it's a cold call. Like you go in with the assumption that like God is working. And even for in your story of God's prevenient grace in your life, how many different people came in at different times and satisfied that role, drew you one more step, that it was all God drawing you. They just played that one role at that one time.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. I don't even know how to follow that up. No, it's good. It's just, just that reminder too. And I think just reminding ourselves that all of these, like, we talked about a lot, like there with the revivals, right? That they start with prayer.
Yeah.
Right? We see these things, and there was just that one a year ago, that's like you see this huge revival, and then you take a step back and you realize how many people were praying for that in that secret place, like we talked about, just consistent prayer for these things. And so I think, that's the way I feel like I've seen God like drawing me to it, like, not a different spiritual practice. It's not that I didn't pray, but just reigniting that flame for me, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
Just bringing those people to prayer consistently, right?
Yeah, what a great reminder. So I guess that's like kind of the call for us all this week is like to be reminded of God's grace in our own life and then use that as fuel to pray for others this week. And man, Courtney, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks,
Courtney.
Thanks for having me. This is sweet.
Yeah, you're just the best, and we love you, and we're just so thankful for all the ways that God has been shaping you and growing you, and honestly, just so privileged that God gets to use you here. Like God uses you here. What a blessing for New Life. So, thanks. We love you. Thanks for joining us today, Courtney, and all you fresh cuppers out there. We'll see you next time.